Good day, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. This is another podcast of the Two Tokens Foundation, the movement here from Amsterdam. Again, hosted by the one and only Jonny Fry.
Hello. How do you say hello in Dutch?
Hello.
Oh, that was easy.
My Irish girlfriend always, gives me a hard time because I tell them, hello came from hello. So the Dutch gave you so much.
Very true, very true.
And today we have as a guest...
We have Oliver, not Oliver Twist, but Oliver from ClearTokens. Thank you very much, Oliver, for coming
Thank you
in.
for having me.
We finally have ClearToken here in the podcast.
Yes, I know.
Yeah, we've tried a
so
couple of
much
times.
for
Yeah,
coming.
yeah. I'm sure. Apologies that Ben can't be here. He's.
We're delighted. He's in the land of the sand, isn't he?
He is in the land of sand. I think it's been a pretty fruitful Abu Dhabi financial week.
Good.
I think there's been a lot of people there. I think there's been a lot of headlines.
And you've had a few announcements.
A few announcements, certainly relevant to our industry, which is great. But
Well, look, before we get stuck into that, can you just give a bit of background on yourself? Because obviously you've been in financial markets for a while, and then
Yep.
just perhaps give just a duffer's guide to what is ClearTokens. Obviously, a relevant company name here at Two Tokens Masterclass here in December towards the end of 2025.
Yeah, and maybe once I unravel what we're doing, maybe the name is a little bit on the nose, but I'm so sure. Great to be here, first of all. Thank you very much for having me. So my name is Oliver Margolis. I'm the head of product at ClearToken. I've been in financial services for 15 years, been in digital assets for 8. Somehow I've miraculously been able to keep my hair despite that time. And ClearToken are building financial market infrastructure for digital assets, which is a very big headline and probably undersells all the things that we're doing. But, there's a lot to uncover. So I'm sort of happy to dig into any sort of aspect of it. But at its crux, I think you sort of asked the question, Jonny, like, what is financial market infrastructure? And it's the pipes and plumbing that you don't see. So, financial market infrastructure, at least in the UK, is a regulated term. It's a designation given by the Bank of England. And it's the regulated payment systems, it's the clearinghouses, it's the CSDs, as I say, it's the pipes and plumbing that give assurances and certainty and take a lot of the risk out of the financial ecosystem. And I think what we've seen in digital assets for years, and there have been numerous examples of when things have gone awry, is that a lack of financial market infrastructure, which is tightly regulated and importantly so, given its systemic nature, has led to some pretty black swan style events, and there are scenarios, even as recently as this year, where a lack of discipline around sort of codified market structure and rules has led to some idiosyncratic events that have left people out of pocket.
Oh my God! Hang on, some really big words, things which I'm not even sure what's going on. So let's go make it really, really simple.
Let's go for it.
So. Back in the day when we were having a scrap with the Dutch because they actually found all the spices and we didn't like that, so we then started sinking the ships and nicking the spices, and we had the Dutch East India Company and the West India Company and all that sort of good stuff. They came up with the idea of publicly limited companies, and then the Brits very quickly copied that, and you then had the development of coffee houses. That was, in a funny way, financial market infrastructure. It was a physical place. Mm-hmm. You'd have a cup of coffee, and you would talk and say, okay, well, let's do a deal, let's do a trade. Probably the Lloyd's insurance market is probably the best example of that, where literally people say, okay, well, your ship's going to go around the world. I'll tell you what, if something happens, I'll cover it financially. I'll give it some protection. And it was either for a fixed sum or it was a percentage of the profit. And one of the biggest finances of those was actually the Crown. Queen Elizabeth was quite happy doing that sort of thing. So that the coffee houses that we're familiar with as a terminology was a financial market infrastructure. Now, obviously, we've seen that it develop massively. And in the old days, literally, we'd shake hands and it was the expression, my word is my bond. But people, unfortunately, were telling porky pies. There were various nefarious actors getting involved, and we had regulation. So now we have exchanges. We have clearinghouses. I'd love you to explain what is a clearinghouse, because that sounds a bit of a funny. And then can you also explain what's a pink swan or a blue?
A black
swan
event. A black swan event is something out of the ordinary that you wouldn't expect. It's supposed to be a once in a X years scenario. global financial crisis, black swan event.
Okay.
Right. So
Because we've got lots of white swans on the Thames, but
yes.
but the Aussies have loads of black swans in Perth, don't they?
yes, I'm not going to talk about Australia given the recent Ashes performance.
Oh, that's true. That's true. Sorry.
You know, we'll just pretend that didn't happen. So black swan events, at least, you know, from my perspective, are things that are, you know, completely out of the ordinary, shouldn't happen. And unfortunately, you know, there have been scenarios and times in the crypto asset market, which has probably, you know, been the most proven market when it comes to digital assets. And again, I'm using a big term there, where that's happened. But let me sort of come back to your original question. It's like, what is a clearinghouse? What does it do? Why? What value does it bring to customers? I would say two things: unlocking capital, mitigating risk. And
How does it do that? Then?
it's a great question. So if we just start in terms of what happens today in markets, and clearinghouses are present in you know, the majority of traditional market asset classes. What happens is that, let's say me and you are doing a trade, Jonny, you and I are counterparties to that trade. If it's not cleared and doesn't go through a clearinghouse, you and I have the risk to each other, both in terms of credit risk, settlement risk, right? I might have to post margin to you, you might have to post margin to me, depending on the direction. Suddenly we're exchanging money, things become quite capital intensive. Suddenly there's a risk that you might go under or you might disappear and run away with my money. So there is inherent...
Well, you might as well.
Listen, I didn't want to say anything. Right, but you're right, I might do as well.
Yeah.
So there's inherent risk in the way that things trade. So what a clearinghouse does is it sits between the middle of those two trading counterparties and becomes the buyer to the seller and the seller to the buyer. And that's done through the process of novation. So the original contract that you and I had together now becomes a contract between me and the clearinghouse and you and the clearinghouse. And what that means is the clearinghouse is there absorbing risk, but ultimately under a very clear set of rules, guidelines, operating processes, which are codified, published, universally applied. Everyone understands how they essentially get from trade execution all the way through to settlement. And so what underpins all of that is the rule book, and what also underpins that is the regulatory compliance that's set out by different regulators around the world. In the UK, it's the Bank of England. But essentially what happens then is at past execution, it's the clearinghouse who manages the life cycle of the instrument all the way through to settlement and delivers settlement finality as part of its operating model.
So in the good old days, it was literally bits of paper being moved around.
Yep.
We then had, various different sort of regulatory sort of laws and developments, and the Big Bang back in the 80s that in theory electrified a lot of the trading. It brought settlement times. How long do you... I can remember back when I first started my career, you had 10 days in which you could actually buy. So you could buy BP shares, and it wasn't until perhaps 10 days later you actually physically paid for them. That settlement time, or T as in time, I suppose, has come from sort of 10, and it's been narrowed down from 3 to 2 to 1.
Yep.
And I know there's a number of initiatives in right across Europe, and certainly in the States and in the UK, where they want it to be delivery versus payment, DVP, which sounds frightfully complicated, but actually you go to your local coffee shop, you don't say, well, tell you what, can I have a cappuccino? I'll pay you next week.
Yeah.
The idea of having a slate at the pub or the wine bar, it doesn't exist typically. So you're expected to, deliver a coffee, and guess what? You're meant to pay. That hasn't been the case in financial markets, but as things go from electronic trading to digital trading, and the new clearinghouses are looking to be able to encompass and enable that, aren't they?
Yeah, and I think, you've talked about delivery versus payment, which again sounds a bit jargony, but it's that very simple construct, right? Which is, I'm going to give you something on the promise that you're going to give me something. But if I give you something and you run away, then I'm at a loose end, I'm potentially legged.
That was our first use case to tokenize the electronic bill of lading, right? So,
You did that with Porter Rotterdam.
Yeah.
But and bizarrely, again, it's a flipping Dutch. You did it again on us, because we've now codified it. Actually, in the last couple of weeks, it's now law, and you're still stuck in. But you came up with that concept with the Porter Rotterdam 2 tokens. Did that work? 5-6 years ago now?
Yeah, that started in 2020.
Because it was a problem around COVID.
Around COVID, yeah.
You had literally had ships arriving at the port, but the paperwork normally was sent by aeroplane. Because the planes were stranded. The boats still moved along the ocean, but the paperwork didn't arrive. So you had the boats clogged up outside ports, waiting for the paperwork to turn up.
And so in wholesale and institutional markets, DVP has become the practice. But if you look at what's been happening in the crypto asset industry, this is an industry that's born out of retail, right? And so the means of basically accessing this markets for a lot of, retail participants was to pre-fund, i.e. park their money on an exchange, right? Click on the exchange, buy the asset that they want. Those assets would be sat there. Now, it might not seem like that there is, or people might not be thinking about the inherent risk that goes with that, but that is not common practice in any institutional market. You've talked about settlement times. That's with good reason, because settlement times provide opportunities to basically do nettings, optimize operations, but also it eliminates the need of pre-funding because people are talking the same language and settling on the same terms.
So now I get the name ClearToken.
Yeah, so now we start to uncover it a little bit. So just to sort of come back to the DVP model, we went live with the first version of our product, which is an FCA-regulated DVP net settlement system. And so what that does is it basically allows market participants, institutional, to trade with each other without pre-funding, for those trades to come through to us. And now not only are we ensuring that there is contingent DVP, which as we've said is the cornerstone, but we can also net all of those trades down. So now whether I'm trading with you or somebody else, I can essentially now manage my obligations centrally. The way that the market is constructed today, there are always bigger fish, idiosyncratic operations. You have complexities of settling on chain as it is. We try to basically reduce that operational overhead, unlock the capital that we talked about by eliminating some of that pre-funding, netting down your obligations, again, unlocking more capital.
Having more liquidity to balances. But so, who are using ClearToken? Who are you targeting?
Yeah, sure. So it's an institutional platform, and we have, a range of clients from brokers to market makers to buy-side firms, exchanges. The very nature of financial market infrastructure is that it's an ecosystem play. I
heard that word earlier today. Ecosystem play.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No idea what it means, do you, Alex?
It means in order to really, if you think about, let's take something very simple, like a social media app, right? The very first Facebook, right? It had limited utility on day one, but the more people used it, the more utility there was, value for everybody. It's the same with us. So the more trade venues I can bring on, the more trades I can net, the more value I can get. So we are not in the market to say it's only one particular type of client. There are many routes into using our services, either directly or indirectly, but we have purposely built what we call a horizontal model, which means we are not tied to any one custodian, any one particular venue, any one particular bank. We are there to make it easier for people to settle and operate, and hopefully, be able to give up those post-trade activities to a pretty established set of rules and practices.
But Oliver, I read something earlier this week. You've literally just been regulated to be able to start doing this.
In the UK?
In the UK.
Your first day, you did 92,000 trades?
Yeah. And so
you went from zero to hero.
Yeah.
So you are getting your Christmas stockings full of goodies this year, hopefully.
We'll see. I mean, we have to look back at
Come on, Ben, cough up.
My behaviour
he's
over
worth
the
it.
previous 12 months. But yeah, so the number of trades has been great, and the value has been great. But really, the question is, from a client standpoint, what were your gross trade obligations before, in terms of your how much did you actually have to settle with each counterparty, and how much are you settling now? And what is the percentage of that compression? How much have I actually saved you? Because I can do 100,000 trades, 200,000 trades. It's about how much can I net down to you and unlock more of that capital and start to standardize your operation, so I don't have to wait for party A to deliver before I can deliver on, right? I can accurately forecast what my capital requirements are. And for firms like market makers, their ability to turn their balance sheet, especially when markets are really picking up, that's priceless.
And why haven't other FMIs, why aren't they doing this?
Are you talking about the specific DVP aspects?
Yeah.
So
and created this clearing facility for allowing tokenized assets.
Yeah, sure. So there are other FMIs and quasi FMIs who are offering clearing facilities, not for spot. So I think we've seen over the last year or two that CME's open interest on their crypto.
Hang on, you got to stop. Spot, is that something on your nose?
Yeah, sure.
And
so
CME,
let me
who are they?
Let me
Where
pay
are
back.
they? What do they do?
So Spot is is just exchanging physical for physical. So
As opposed to
a derivative contract, which would essentially be taking better
futures, options.
exactly
Yeah.
exposure. And so spot crypto, i.e. the physical handling of crypto assets, I think has been a bit of a challenge for some firms because there are some idiosyncratic risks with handling crypto assets. And that's why we've had, good, robust regulation coming in both in the UK and also across the globe, really, on what the standards and practices are from an AML standpoint to make sure that certain firms...
Anti-money laundering.
Thank you very much.
So what license did you have to get in the UK?
So we were licensed to be a virtual asset service provider.
So not a CAS.
It's like a CAS,
Like a CAS.
but in the UK, yes. And so we have that in order to handle the crypto assets and facilitate the exchange of that. And that includes stable coins. But we also have a payment services license, which means that we can also handle the fiat, which is integral because part of the promise of blockchain and atomicity and being able to settle in real time, you need to take a step back and recognize that a lot of pricing and a lot of activity is done in fiat pairs, and those run on two very different rails. So you need to bring fiat rails in as well as crypto rails in together and harmonize those processes to do true DVP.
So with this license, you start in the UK.
Yes.
And all the UK aligned countries. What about Europe? If you want to go into Europe, you have to apply for a CASP license and passport that throughout Europe, or
yeah. So we're still sort of exploring how we can service European clients, and so that's sort of like in discussion with our
Come to
legal
Amsterdam.
counsel. Yes.
They're brilliant.
Yeah. So
Seriously, they're much more open-minded than a lot of other jurisdictions.
yeah, we did a roundtable earlier this year with AFME.
AFME, and we were
Dutch
we were
Central
hosted at the Dutch Central Bank, and they were very keen. In the same way, in the UK, we're looking to bring out a digital gilt. There's a number of jurisdictions, and Holland, I understand, they're very keen on looking to bring out a Dutch gilt. A Dutch gilt. Oh, I've done it again. A
Take
Dutch
it out.
just as well. A Dutch government. I want to say a Gilder bond. But the Gilder doesn't exist anymore.
The Gilder doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah, so it'd be a Dutch bond
Yeah.
issued in a digital format, which, again, with respect the average listener, that's not going to think, so what? But for institutions, the debt market's about $140 trillion. And if you can take out some of the efficiencies there, some of the studies I know, I think it was HSBC did a study, and they reckon that they could save between 0.2 and 0.3% on the issuance of a Dutch bond. And we've had one of the two tokens members, ABN AMRO, just across the road. They've done a lot of this in a digital format. And that's the sort of thing your exchange could do, because we're not just talking about crypto. You can basically then handle any tokenized investment on your platform.
Yeah, so that's a great tee up. Thank you, Jonny. So I don't know if that was planned, but that was perfect. Thank you. So yes, we're looking at how can we remove some of the risk and unlock capital in crypto assets. But we know that the digital asset market is much more than crypto assets. Yes. And so we, as well as getting our licenses that we just got for our CT Settle, our first product, the authorization as the clearinghouse under the Bank of England, we've also been admitted, and we're actually the first firm in the UK to go into the Bank of England's digital security sandbox. Now, for those that don't know, the Digital Security Sandbox is a Bank of England and HMT sponsored initiative.
Is it similar to because Two Tokens has been in the European blockchain sandbox for all three cohorts?
Exactly the same.
Is it the same?
Yeah. So the focus here is around bringing new financial market infrastructure to market that is based on innovative technology, specifically distributed ledger technology. And so ClearToken has entered the sandbox to become what's called a digital securities depository, also known as a central securities depository, sort of built on distributed ledger. Now, what is the central securities depository? Why is it important to markets? And Jonny, to your question, what does that unlock? Again, back to the very beginning, what is financial market infrastructure? It's the pipes and plumbing that you don't see. So CSDs, central securities depositories, are effectively where settlement occurs for securities across a specific jurisdiction.
Give me a name of one that we might have heard of.
Euroclear. Or Clearstream, those are well-known CSDs in the UK and in Europe.
DTCC?
Yes, that's the one in the US.
So, Alex, in the 70s, they literally used to shut Wall Street on a Wednesday.
Yeah.
Because there was so much paper wandering around, literally in sort of sacks and wheelbarrows. They were moving literally, and they said, well, we can't cope with the amount of paperwork. So they had Monday and Tuesday, shut on a Wednesday, trade Thursday, Friday, got the weekend sorted out, and the markets open up again. So this thing called the DTCC was established. We say all the shares, all the bits of paper in one place. So we're not going to move bits of paper. We're basically going to move IOUs, but we know where the shares are. And then, to be fair, then the Europeans copied with Euroclear and name's gone completely.
Clearstream.
Clearstream.
Yes.
But don't you think that Euroclear would come with their own ClearToken solution?
So listen, there've been lots of advancements across CSDs and looking at how they can handle.
And you are absolutely right. They are working on it, as are the DTCC, because they've realised this is the way forward. And that's why NASDAQ in the States have been lobbying really, really hard to create a digital exchange. And the first example of that is in Texas. That they're actually going to create a stock exchange. It's got authorised to have a stock exchange in Texas, which will be trading digital securities, similar to what you're talking. But you'll still need a CSD to settle. You still need the coffee house to bring it together. Otherwise, you've got lots of. But that kind of defeats the whole object. The idea of using blockchain was that you and I could go back peer to peer, no counterparty risk. So it's. But we haven't got there yet, have we?
It's not there entirely, right? And
hopefully we won't. Otherwise, ClearToken's function suddenly sort of becomes
I
reduced.
could see other use cases of ClearToken. I mean, if you look at the energy market, there's going to be a peer-to-peer energy exchange, and those exchanges are also going to clear, right? So I suppose you could use that technology there as well.
So I think it's important to sort of segment both the market and also what we're doing. So, the clearinghouse that we have is there about unlocking capital and reducing risk and having a clear rule book and a central counterparty that people can ultimately settle with.
Yeah.
The CSD is the rails, but also the legal protection to know that your obligations and what you are due and what you're due to pay have been formally settled. Now, in blockchain world, you're right, the technology is key, right, in terms of being able to fractionalize, open the door to other assets, bring more liquidity in. The opportunity is endless, but the technology is only half the equation. And so we recognize, and this is what the Bank of England is sort of like working towards with the concept of the digital securities depository, is that legal finality is critical. And the UK is a perfect place to do that, given its standing both in global markets, but also a pretty well-established legal framework in terms of collateral use, precedent, and relative stability in terms of what can people expect. But this concept of settlement finality, from a legal standpoint, is what we're really pressing upon with ClearToken CSD. If we look at certain platforms that may be enterprise owned or backed, there are still questions around if a party goes into default, ultimately who is the legal title holder and beneficial owner of said asset, right? And that can be disputed and taken to court. With the CSD, they operate as the top tier register of ownership for that jurisdiction. And so that's what we are bringing to the market. It's about ensuring that institutional players can operate with assurances and guarantees as they do with every other market in a growing space.
It seems to me that ClearToken should sign the manifesto.
They should.
Yeah.
You better just give us you can't just say the manifesto. You've got to explain what you mean by that. Though.
Well, we came up, AFME and Two Tokens wrote...
Who are AFME?
AFME, the AFME,
Well, if I knew who it was, I wouldn't ask you, would I?
Ooh.
You can't remember what it stands for either.
You do, you know that, right? It was based in London, Frankfurt, all the big banks are...
Big banks and asset managers, it's like a trade body that they represent.
But basically outlining what a token economy might look like in 2030, and I think a company like ClearToken, you're part of that infrastructure. I think we should you should read it first of all. We published it last month. You can get it on our website, and you were part of it.
Yeah.
Wait, remember.
Would love to read it. Thank you.
But it's quite a good example. So Alex touched on power. So Two Tokens got a consortium of about 30, 40 companies across Europe and looking at how do you make the whole infrastructure, to use your words, the plumbing, how do you make it more efficient? Because the Dutch are just in the process of investing 200 billion euros on grids, literally power cables, and because they suffer the same problem we do. They've got lots of turbines in the North Sea that they're paying not to be used.
Right.
So they now need to connect them so that they can actually bring that power onshore and have a lot more independence, either to sell it on to some of their neighbours or use within Holland. But how do you exchange that information, the data, the electrons, from whether it's from turbines, whether it's from solar, and the need to have a clearinghouse, for want of a better expression, to use Oliver's words. So that's a very practical example, which you couldn't do that by rocking up to the Dutch Stock Exchange, with respect.
It's all micro clearing, right? That's what it is.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think you talk about pipes and plumbing, and some of these bridges. So you can call it interoperability, which is a
I knew that would
buzzword.
creep in.
Yeah, so, but for some people, this is maybe a bit of a stumbling block. We've seen a lot of platforms have a lot of success in sort of being able to do issuances on chain of new securities. But then how do I get access to that if I'm not your client? How do I make the most of that asset if I'm, again, locked within those walls? So even stepping aside the point of assessment finality, which is very much a legal construct, how do I make the most of my asset? And our principle at ClearToken is that no asset should be left idle. There's an opportunity in all of them, whether they be a settlement asset because I want to pay for something using, a fraction of my Vodafone share to get a coffee, or whether it be because, actually I now have another asset or a commodity that I want to be able to use as collateral and maybe reduce some of my lending overheads. And all of these are possible with the technology, but they require some of the legal certainty that's needed to know that in the event of the worst case scenario, or even the best.
And Alex, this goes back to the point we changed Class 4 to bring in the impact of AI.
Yes, absolutely.
Because the AI engines, they're going to be much cleverer than any trader in the world.
Yeah.
Once you've got agentic AI, and they will go and search and seek out exactly what you're saying. It may be using Vodafone for your coffee, it may be using your real estate, maybe a bit of gold, it may be using.
Why is BlackRock tokenizing all ETFs? Right?
Why does Larry Fink think that? And also you've got other companies like Robinhood. Not the Sheriff of Nottingham one, nope. The one in America. Don't we get confused with that? Yeah. Look, Oliver, thank you very much. It's not a straightforward thing you're doing. I know you've been plugging away for quite a while, so congratulations.
That's why I got the masterclass to explain.
He is the master at the masterclass, yeah. The master clearinghouse master, as opposed to the headmaster. Thank you for joining us today, and we're looking forward to your presentation a bit later on. Alex, thanks for getting this all organised, and thank you for listening to the Two Tokens Masterclass podcast.
That was it for today's podcast. Thank you for listening in, and please subscribe so you don't miss out on our upcoming episodes. If you want to get in touch with us, you can find our contact details at www.twotokens.org.